Welcome to the Woman Every Day podcast, the show where we celebrate the stories of remarkable women who navigate the beautiful complexities of motherhood, ambition, and nuptials. I'm your host, Regina Joy Lane, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey of inspiration and empowerment. Whether you're a mother, a career-driven woman, or someone navigating the intricacies of partnerships or marriage, this podcast is for you. Get ready to be inspired, uplifted, and empowered as we embark on this transformative journey together. Before we begin, I want to express my gratitude to our incredible listeners. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps us reach more people who can benefit from these inspiring conversations. Now, let's dive into today's episode of Woman Every Day. Stay tuned and get ready to be inspired. If you have been following us on social media, then you have a clue of who our guest is for this episode, and it is none other than Alicia Wade. And y'all, let me read her bio just so y'all can understand who is on this call. It is Alicia Wade. She is an accomplished leader, TEDx speaker. Okay, this is like our second TEDx speaker. I need to get my life together. Coach, business owner, consultant with over 16 years of experience leading teams with Fortune 100 companies. That means she's a boss if you didn't pick up on that. And as CEO and lead consultant for the HR Source, her reach and impact has only added to her depth and breadth of experience. So we are so excited to have Alicia here today. We're going to dive in, but let's just get started for our listeners. Alicia, if you could just let everyone know a little bit about yourself and just kind of quickly go through those stats that are so important, like what's the relationship status? Do you have kids? How many? And then give us an overview of like what you do for work.
Okay, awesome. So I am Alicia Wade, which Regina has eloquently, you hear things about yourself and you're like, oh, but you have to accept that too. And wait a minute, we have the same cup today.
Shut the front door.
Yes. Awesome. So we're staying hydrated. We're staying hydrated, listeners. Hopefully you are as well, right? Whether you're watching or listening. But a little bit about me. So let's start with, because I show up with big Houston energy all the time. So from Houston, Texas.
Big H.
So yes. And so if you are truly from Houston, then you would know 713. That's the first area code, even though my number is 832, right?
Okay.
So that is that. Grew up here. My parents are still here. I have one sibling. So my brother and my sister-in-law are still here. They actually just celebrated the birth of their new baby. Her name is Imani Khalees Emmanuel.
Oh,
yes. So new life. Yes, new life. She shares the same day as the Alabama brawl. So she is like came in here with full nothing but energy. So that is her. But I am married, relationship status. I've been married for 18 years, met my husband in college. We have one son, yes, Jonathan, who is 15. He is starting the 10th grade. So that's
kid life. Okay.
Yes.
We're gonna dive in.
Yes, we can. Yeah. Because it's very different having a sibling that has more than one and then having just one. So it definitely keeps me centered when I move from the mindset, which I'm sure we'll talk about, from agitation versus adversity. I'm always in that space of like this, don't complain. You just have one, right? So I'm so thankful. So thankful.
Awesome. Okay. Yes. So you've got the one kid. Let's talk about Jonathan first, because he's a 15-year-old. And I don't know about you, but I know about me. And I feel like parenting these teenagers in this day and age, for my boomers, my parents' generation, for all you younger people, I just want y'all to listen first. I know y'all feel like y'all think y'all know, but teenagers these days are different, in my opinion. Is it just me?
I don't disagree. I think the first part that I would say that's different is their style, right? So I have still, and I share this because I still don't understand hoodies in literally the 100-degree weather that is here in Texas.
Right.
Crocs all the time, but it just need to be comfy, right? And to be just, but I think that also represents I don't want to say don't care, but very lax, very lax.
Very
But
lax.
I can't say, when my son does stuff, like Dro will always say like, wonder where you got that from. So we're very aware of like those things that agitate us that are us. So Jonathan has a strong personality. I'm very strong-willed, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I won't say it's just different, but yeah, there are some tendencies, but teenagers are teenagers. He's more of like meh, like just unbothered about things.
Unbothered. Yeah, there's
Unbothered.
definitely a lot of that.
Yeah.
Like, so tell me, he's 15.
15.
He's a handsome little kid as
Thank
well.
you.
So I'm curious, how do you deal with, as a mom, uh the young ladies? Does he play a sport?
Yes.
Does he have a
So this is funny
girlfriend?
because Jonathan has just had like his first conversation where he felt comfortable sharing about girls, right?
Hey.
And he was very bold in this. So here's what was interesting. He was dating this girl, and I won't share too much about this so he won't be embarrassed, because, his friends find things and they use it and they do a lot of smack talking. So for instance, one of his friends that found me on Twitter had all these pictures of me and he was just like, give me your phone. Let me block him right now. And he thought it wasn't funny to him, right? So I'm going to protect the innocent and not get too many details. But yeah, Jonathan, he's very open with my husband about like girls that he likes.
Okay.
Of course, he thinks it's very cool, his approach, right? He thinks he has it figured out. But I will share, since you asked, like this Sunday, we went to eat after church and we were talking about homecoming. And I'm like, Jonathan, when is your homecoming? Because of course, everything is last minute, right? Like I'm gonna, I guess, tell you. So last year, freshman year, he had no interest in going to homecoming. He like everything was just like he was too cool for school, right?
Yeah.
But this year he was like, I said, hey, I'm testing the waters, right? Like, hey, do you want to go to home? He's like, yeah. And I'm like,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So I said, are you going to ask the date? And he's like, yeah.
Oh.
And when we start talking about these numbers, I was like, of options. And so we had to walk through decision quality, right? Of, hey, like you want to play Mr. Cool, but let me help you. Like if you're going to play this out, your top option based on this approach can be moving on, right? So we had the whole thing. I had to bring Jill along on like buying mums, like what that was. He was aware that he had to do, like he's thought about all of this. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's where he is with, he just started like sharing, but before it was like total lockdown. I knew nothing.
So that's so interesting because I have girls, so I get all the details. We know who the boyfriend is, what they wore to school today, what their middle name is, where they live, like what video games they like. So we get all the details over here. Sometimes I wish I had less details. But you're a parent of a young man, so
and it's the opposite. It's the opposite. And it'll just like, it's subtle things. Like I think you have to, and parents, I think it's so many skills you learn as a parent, right? And they're like, get better as you move forward, or you have to realize this is a time where I need to get better. So I would say definitely listening and listening to what is not said or what is asked, you are informed that way. So for instance, I get my hair all kind of ways. It'll be different braids, and his interest in that, like, oh, what are those called? Or like so are you getting these type of nails if I'm going to get my nails, things like that. So that's how I know, like,
okay, yeah,
you're not slick.
He's crossing over. So tell me, how do you balance the role of being a mom with everything you do as a career? And we'll get into that. If you want to slide into it with this question, feel free.
Yeah. So I guess I'll share a little bit about me professionally. So my full-time job, so I'm a director. I work with Starbucks. I really enjoy my job. I really love it. My territory, I do have to travel a lot, but I've worked retail for, like you said, close to 18 years now. That professionally, obviously worked in college and in high school and things like that. But my life, probably at least for the last, I would say since I was pregnant with Jonathan, like I've been in multi-unit roles. So my job has not looked traditional. So I think as everybody was kind of going through the work from home, I had always had that type of, like, that's what my office life looked like. So being able to balance has looked different because I've been, as you know, like in this training mode and not knowing where I would be. So I have been off with my routine. So I share all of that to say that has helped in the past, but I am now finding what my new routine looks like for 2023 and beyond. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say the balance for me is really around the schedule. And of course, as your kids get older, they have different things that are involved in. I think I've taken roles because I've wanted to, go to Moms with Muffins with Mom, or be able to pick up and do those different things. And I think it started with me getting a really good schedule, which didn't only just include his activities or work, right? Like it included the different things that I enjoy for self-care, right? Whether that's, getting my hair done, working out. And as you know, I'm very routine in that way. And that had to be right. Okay. And then I think also with my partner, like I think, once Jonathan started, so we put him in school, he was in school from the beginning. So we were working parents. He was in daycare like at 12 weeks. So he was like a little bitty baby, and that was my life. And I think and I share that because I think sometimes it's glamorized online, or people think because you have a certain title or job, like there's this nanny. No, there's never been a nanny. Like, no. We was picking up, dropping off. Like it was real out here. And we had to make decisions with our job. So when he was younger, there was a daycare on the campus that Dro worked at. So that's how it worked. But then once he went to school, we had to make a decision on picking up and dropping off. And that's what we wanted to do, right, in elementary. So there was a lot of things that worked out when I say like balance, of making sure the day or those things, because I picked up. That's what I did, like that was how we broke that up. But I think that partnership was huge. If that's answering your question. And I think now as he's getting older, I would have to say I'm finding that. And I think a part of it is, and I know I've shared this with you as a friend, just that grace for yourself, because can you make the game on this day during the week? Or you go, and some moms are there. And I'm not the mom with the t-shirt with his face on it. I'm not the do it yourself. Like I don't have the big head. Like I'm not that mom. And I'm comfortable not being her. But I am the loudest yelling mom. Like I will say I can hold that down. I got that. So it just looks different. So, but I would just say from the beginning, that's how it's just constantly evolved of like how it works for us. And I think that is when I reflect on that question, as you say that, I think Joel and I have continued to be very clear on our plan and what works for us, and not looking sideways to say what other people are doing or how they manage their household and their parenthood.
And that's so important. My first guest, Nakia Young, and I'm sort of juxtaposing you against her, just to show the difference where she is working from home and also homeschooling her kids. You're working. And Jonathan is doing his thing. And especially now at 15, he's a lot more independent than, Nakia's children. But it also sounds like you and Gerald work together to be there to support Jonathan throughout his journey. It sounds like he plays sports, because you said you mentioned going to the games.
So he plays basketball. That's his sport. He played football for a little bit, but like now basketball is his thing. He is very focused on that. He has goals with that. This summer it was all about like bulking up and the gains. So that was what he was focused on. But I would say, even if I take it to probably, like I think about a pivotal moment with him as a teenager, probably happened like last year, where we did have to get on the same page and really sit down and talk about like what his goals were and what our goals were for him, and making sure that our actions and the way that we showed up was clear. So there was just kind of like, okay, let's ask him. And I ask a lot of questions naturally. I'm a very curious person. So my parenting approach is very different. Like even after games, I'm like, okay, how did that go? And it irritates him, but I want him, maybe because a line of work I'm in, I want you to have a thought in your head. Like, what do you think? That's so important to me, that he leaves us and has thoughts and ability to
think critically for himself.
Yes, not what mom said, not what this person, or I go back to the meh personality, right? Like, oh, it was great. And it was like, but it wasn't.
Being disengaged and not really plugging in. So, okay, he's an athlete.
Yep.
I have no, well, and that's a strong statement. I was going to say I have no idea what it's like to raise an athlete. And that's not true. My oldest, she played volleyball until she was medically released. We found out she had a spinal condition. In between sophomore and freshman year. So she ended up managing the volleyball team. Esther has always been very athletic in her abilities, but she really took to dance and cheer. So of course we're at the football games and the basketball games. Amber could care less. So I'm curious to know, because I see a lot of friends who have athletic children. You know, they are playing one sport year round, they are going to all the camps. AAU is very popular for basketball. Like, does Jonathan plug in with all of that? Or are you guys just sort of letting him kind of dictate? What is it like raising a teenage athlete these days?
Yeah. So he definitely is involved. So he's going to his sophomore year. So it looks a little different. So let me first say for the listeners, I play sports, and I think
I was gonna say, yeah,
that's so I competed very competitively from second grade all the way through college. So for those, that is I always introduce and share that, and I didn't because we're talking about, being a mom here. But I share that because I think it is a core principle of like who I am. I enjoy being on teams. I think my best performance is collaborative. I enjoy that. My best performance, I know that now, right? And being a teammate. But I would say that also dictates how I parent him as an athlete, right? So I share this, and this is not any judgment to anybody else, but I'm not living vicariously through my son. And I see that in a lot of my friends, right? In their posts and the things that they're sharing. And it's just like, school is number one. Period. So to your point around supporting him and things like that, we're at that point where fortunately, Jonathan is very gifted and does well in school. And I realized that in, like you said, in talking to parents and other things that people have done. So growing up, for him, it was finding summer camps to accelerate. It wasn't. So now he's in honors classes and pretty much is a grade ahead, right? Based on the courses that he's taken.
Yeah.
So, but we're at the point now where we're meeting skill, right? And ability. And he's in how do you continue to get better at that skill? So you are naturally smart, but you got to study, right?
Yeah.
So even yesterday, because I'm off this week, I'm on PTO. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm so, we're talking about what I was going to do this week. And he goes, I wish I was off. I said, Jonathan, school just started. What's going on? He's like, oh, I got to go to bed. Like he's going through all these things, but because it's real now. Like there's quizzes. It's the second week of school.
Yeah.
And so we definitely supported that, but we're at that point where the focus is helping him work on those study skills, because that's not a strength. It's not a strength.
Hey, listen.
And it's not yes. So that support is coming up, and I can pause and come back to that. But I think that's the piece also to answer your question of no, he doesn't get to decide how this looks. Of course, we guide and say, what are your goals? Okay, here's what you have to do with that. Like, this is how much you have to practice. This is when you have to go to training, and keeping him in line to make sure his effort matches the goals. But yeah, he's doing the camps. He's getting invited to things. So yeah, it's not overwhelming for me because I have been there as a former athlete. Probably someone that hasn't. It's more like part of the course. So that's kind of, if that answers your question, it doesn't feel like a lot because he's very clear on what he wants to do. So it helps us be very clear as parents of supporting him in that way.
Okay, so that's interesting. I think about you being an athlete as a female, and then now you're raising an athlete as a male, and he's Black. And so this is coming from a place of ignorance because I was not an athlete. I was in the band. I was shaking my tail feather and twirling my baton. Like that's what I was doing. It was fun. It was fun. Don't get me wrong. Shout out to Booker T, Elite Majorettes. Holla.
Represent.
Yeah, must. So like I always think about our Black male athletes. I feel like they are even from a young age, they are celebrated and almost like put on a pedestal amongst their peers, sometimes even amongst like teachers and whatnot. Do you see any of that maybe even creeping in with Jonathan? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I have the same
Yeah.
perspective just because, I come from a very athletic family. My brother
Yeah.
plays sports. He plays sports in college, plays sports professionally, played in the NFL. And a lot of my cousins played as well. So definitely have a personal experienced everything that you just said. And I don't disagree. I think when I think about his experience, I would say it's different because I would say it's been very interesting in the school that he is in, right? So when we moved, Jonathan went to the same elementary school from like kindergarten to fourth grade. So we moved, it was start of his fifth grade year, which then he went to a new middle school. It's a brand new school. It's the first year there. And so we've been here in this school district, which is a different school district as well. And I would say the experience he had, he's had a different experience from me in many ways, particularly in elementary where he had Black male teachers. Like I was thinking about, I never had a Black male teacher, like ever, K through 12, ever.
That's great. Mr. Williams, shout out. Love you, Mr. Williams.
And you got that one, Mr. Williams, right? Like, so Jonathan had in the fifth grade year, his main teacher was a Black male, right? And he had
Wow.
honors class. Yes, they had on, and not a kinder, you know what I mean? Like this was his teacher. And then in like his favorite teacher, when he went to middle school, he had they only had three. So I share that to say in elementary, there were Black men in the school and they had started like this little basketball league that they were doing that they came up with. So it wasn't an elevation as more as it was examples. Gerald volunteered, of course, being in a fraternity, he's always had positive images in that way.
Yeah.
So I would say his school experience has looked a little different. And now with this new school district, it's a lot about like what the parents have to donate or they're doing this. So he's already had to navigate a lot of just interesting situations where what basically the audio is not matching the visual. So you're saying we have a tryout, but this is what's happening. But it's one of those schools, and I don't know if it's like this in your area or even for the listeners, but you go to elementary schools and it's ads all around the school, like the little picket. You go to the track and it's all of these banners, right? Or you're like, to give a perspective, this may have been seventh grade, I think, and I may be off, but basically between middle and junior high, he had a drones class. Like it was drones that he did. So we had to pay for the packet, did this. One of the parents, and you had to sign a waiver, one of the parents had paid for this area that they went to, this multi-million-dollar, and trust me, we ain't in that type of house, but they had donated this. And that's where they went and practiced. So if that gives any idea to answer your question around what he's seeing is not necessarily an elevation, but realizing like, in a lot of cases, it's been a daddy's ball, right? Type situation, or who is my dad? And this is what my dad does. And that's very hard to explain to a 10-year-old, to 11-year-old, right? And keep them engaged. So that's been more of our conversations versus you better make sure you ain't better than nobody. Like it's not that. It's that's kind of been the scenario. If that gives a kind of picture of.
It does. It does. Okay, so we've talked enough about Jonathan. Thank you for letting us embarrass you for a moment.
Yeah. He probably will never listen to it. He'll be okay.
Okay, awesome. I want to talk about some of the challenges you face trying to juggle motherhood and your relationship and career and all of that. What are some of those challenges and how do you overcome them?
Yeah. So where do you want to start with, because those are like 3 or 4. So we want to start with.
Maybe pick one of the biggest challenges that you've faced in just trying to juggle it all. Like the convergence of, sometimes I feel like I'm the epicenter of work and kids and my spouse. And it's like, okay, pause. Give me a moment to breathe so that I can triage, the day.
Yeah. Here's what I would say. The first thought, I think it always starts with your assessment and your mindset. And I shared that. And I know you knowing this about me. So I think you and I are very similar in we like to do a lot. right? So I share that to say, in a relationship, you know, and Joel is very aware of that about me, right? But when you think about my threshold of what I consider busy or busyness to the average person is just probably ridiculous, right? And I know you can relate, right? And the listeners know all the things that you have going on. So when for you all that listen and know Regina Joy, you know exactly what I mean when it's just like, okay, all the things. And that's not, you know what, I say that very respectfully, but
Yeah.
I also share that we have to acknowledge there's a lot of times as women, we base that, like that's the baseline and that's not it, right? So I want to make sure people understand when they hear, oh, she has a business, she does this or these things. I think it's this push to get people to be a boss or do that. And that's not everybody's journey. That's not everybody's journey. And you have to know what you're built for.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you say, hey, I'm that, if you like being that, I know from the time I met you, you've always said, I want to be a mother. So us having this conversation, this is at this point, almost 25 years, right? We're talking 23 years that you've been talking about that is on brand for you. Okay. So I share that with mothers of everybody does not grow up wanting to be a mom, wanting to be a mom. So some people have stumbled here and you have to know that stumbled into motherhood and they're like,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So I have to say that to say, you know what I mean? Maybe there's somebody, and it's on my heart to say this, maybe somebody is at that stage in their life where one of those areas is like, this is not necessarily what I bargained for. And I share that to say, you have to know that. So to juggle or to keep up with those things, it's noticing at those times where you don't have the energy or maybe that you are losing, right? And I use the word losing because you're not always getting an A+ in all of those areas.
Yeah.
And there's times where I've had a lot of pressure on myself to say that of like, oh my gosh, I'm not here, I'm not there. But I would say the first part is me acknowledging that I cannot be everything for everybody. And nobody's asking me to, right? Like, that's why I have to do my self-talk. They didn't ask me to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, so I think from a work standpoint, I'm in a really good place of being clear about boundaries. You know, that's something that I've had to learn, which we could dig into that, but I definitely think that has helped balance because it has not always been that way. And then from a relationship standpoint, I think you go through phases in your relationship and you have to acknowledge where you are and not compare this season to a previous one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so because we are going to get into some relationship
Let's
stuff.
do it. Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit longer about um like, can you name a specific moment or experience that stands out to you as like a defining moment for you in your journey of specifically around being a mom,
Mhm.
um, while also being a career woman? Uh, I've for me, and not that it has to be negative, but I think
Yep.
about, and I spoke about this on a previous episode, uh, just when was a stay-at-home mom
Mhm.
and then trying to get back into the workforce, I noticed that a very defining moment for me was realizing, oh crap, I don't have any work experience. So this is gonna be kind of challenging getting back into the workforce, trying to explain, yes, I've been, keeping my home and taking care of the kids, and
Mhm.
people don't care. And so that was a moment for me, like if I could go back and do it again, that's something I would have done differently. And I definitely try to teach my girls, not to say you can't stay at home, but it's like there's a certain way to approach this. Um, if you intend to work, which I think
Yeah.
that you should, because you should have your own stuff, your own
Mhm.
income, and you should be able to be independent if you need to be.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a defining moment, but to your point, very distinct, right? And I remember I was at a point, definitely when I was pregnant, and I can think of two different like decisions that I made based on um, support and now having a different value. I would say I think definitely motherhood changed my values and definitely my motivation, right? And not level of motivation, but motive, right? Like this is here. So definitely I would say from a motherhood. So I would say when I was pregnant, I remember I was I had interviewed for this position and I didn't get it. And it was just devastating. I was just like bawling my eyes out, right? But I'm pregnant and I had a boss that really, believed in me. She created all these different experiences for me. She was just a really good coach for me, right? And so I had been pulled out of my job. I'm pregnant. And you and I talked about this. So I had to actually take a leave of absence when I was pregnant to have surgery. Okay. So I shared this because it's all of these things, right? Like you're preparing, you got the closet with the diapers, you're getting your bed. And all of this is nothing is concrete. So I'm like, I don't have a job because she's pulled me out of this position to do this development. Right. And then I failed, like I bombed it. And it's like, what I got to go out. So then I got sick while I'm doing this. And then I come back and not sick. I had to have surgery. Right. And then I come back and it's all of these things. So I shared that. That's definitely a time that I think about. I share that vulnerably with people because people think it's all great, right? They look at you, they look at your child and think that, oh, you only have one child when they don't know my journey. And this I have scars to this day, you know what I mean, from this surgery. And most people don't have to have an open stomach surgery, right? At being 6 months pregnant. And I shared that because it was, I had cysts before and I'm fine because this is what we're talking about. And I knew that, right, when I got pregnant, but it was like, hey, at this point, you may have to have it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to specialists, things like that. Well, it came to that point. And one day I'm working out. I worked out the whole time while I was pregnant and I'm at the gym. And it's just like, oh, you can imagine this, right? Like this threshold of pain we're talking about. Well, I ended up having to be rushed into the hospital and getting cysts removed. One was the size of a grapefruit, another a size of a tennis ball at 6 months. Okay. So I put listeners, so if you're following here, like these things that are going on, you can imagine there's stitches and all these things. I think that moment really changed me because I'm a big planner. And sometimes the best preparation will still have you like outside. I'm a very visual, right? You're outside looking at your own life, like
what is going on?
What's going on? Like, but I did, and it was none of that. So I definitely probably say that's the first one because that's what, like for me, and not necessarily tragic, but like you're not in charge.
Yeah.
And that was the lesson God showed me in that moment. And then I think that has carried forward. And I see that, in the career of like, you have to be open to that. So that I share, and it works out, it all works out always, but I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say that's probably the biggest that was like, aha, it was like, yeah, get your mind right.
Yes. And, it reminds me so much. I mean, we're talking about being an athlete. So even though I wasn't necessarily athlete, but I'm sure you will remember there was a time where I was very fit, had the 8-pack, was chisel cut, all the things. And so when I got pregnant, my abdominal wall was really, compromised because it was so muscular. So my third pregnancy, it completely tore. You talking about being in pain. But I couldn't have surgery because it would have been major. But after I gave birth to Amber, which is why she is the last, they had to go in and repair my abdominal wall because it completely tore from the top to the bottom.
Oh, wow.
Not fun. Like my intestines were on the outside of my abdominal wall. They had to like lay them back in there and all the things. So not fun. I mean, good Lord, the things we do and endure for our kids, we do it again, of course. But I'm so glad that you made it through that. It had to be so scary. And yeah, you're right. Your hustle absolutely picks up after that.
It does. And then your motivation, you know what I mean? Because I think I always try to check my motives of like, why am I doing this? Especially with, you're ambitious. You're like, okay, I want to do this. I want to be here. All of that you continue to check. Like, do I really need to do that? Is that really? And I would say even with my sorority, like I was very active up until that point. I pulled back and was like, I can't do that. Like, I really want to be a general member. And then people in the show was like, nope, they wouldn't let me, but I could not. My level of involvement had to look different once I had a baby. So Is it a want to, or is this something that I need to do? It looked totally different.
But it's so important to be in tune with yourself, your life, your family. And it's like, look, this is what we need to do as a family. Like, this is the best decision for me. I can't meet these expectations that you all have for me. I have got to do what is best for me, my physical body, my family. And, it's quite frankly, nobody else's business.
Right.
Sometimes people, um, you know, you may look at a family or a family may look at yours and wonder like, why are they, how are they? And it's like,
Yeah,
you know what? That is none of my business.
absolutely.
You just don't know people's story and what they may be going through, struggling with, to keep their family healthy and whole.
Yeah.
So, okay, you were doing this while you were working, and I'm just so curious, like, how do you, how do you nurture that personal growth? Um, like, do you feel like sometimes when it comes to prioritizing family as well, do you feel like sometimes work gets the best of you and maybe there's a flux or flow between who's getting the best of
Of
you?
course. Yeah.
And then how do you keep that professional side of you nurtured as well?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. I definitely do, because it's only so many hours in a day. Right. So
Here
I
is
was
24.
so
I
many.
don't know. I feel like you be getting 30, Alicia. I feel
No,
like you get 30.
no. Say 24. So I think to answer your question, I definitely, it's a definitive yes. I do feel like there's a winner. It's not always, but I think is you have to have that check and be able to say, okay, hey, this is getting to be too much. So I think that's where that idea, because I would say earlier in my career, I didn't, based on growing up, it was seen as like, we talked about the different generations, like being lazy was like an ill, ugh, right? So this idea of working hard and doing that was something that was praised and rewarded, especially when you think about in the Black, like the idea of labor and doing these things are celebrated, right? The idea of rest, that is not in the vocabulary. Like I think about my parent, we talk about this now, like you don't earn rest, you deserve it. So I had to
Can you
battle.
say that again?
Yes, you do not have to earn rest. Okay. You do not. You do not. Okay.
Oh, that's so
And,
true.
and think about the small things we say, like, oh, you deserve it. Oh, you work. And it's like, yeah, you're right. But it's like that work for it. So I would say that created some really bad habits. And then I had to realize like something I really liked. I liked working. I liked doing those things, but what was the cost? Right. Everything has a right. And everything has a backside. Even the best things that you do, if you do it in excess, it is too much. So I would say definitely to answer and be transparent, that happens. And, you don't see that on social media when people are sharing the accolades and things like that of like who's holding them up, what that adjustment looks like as you're traveling. How does that adjust your spouse's schedule? Because that does impact your role when it's like, okay, I'm not going to be out of town 2 days this week. It's going to be 3. So what does that look like for what's going on? Or, okay, Jonathan, this is what you have to do, or how we have to like make sure that he's prepared now. Like he can do all the things of getting himself together, cleaning his clothes, all those things to be ready and make sure that he's there for the week. So I would say, I don't feel like to answer your question, my professional self, um, gets the short end in regards to like development. And I guess maybe I'm thinking of a short side. There's probably times that it has, but I definitely think, particularly since COVID, I have really, and I guess it's just kind of like a time frame for me in my mind when I think about just a deep immersion in trying to be a better person, you know,
All around.
all around, you know what I mean? Surrounding myself with, being open to friendship, being open to friends that make me better, having a circle of people that do that. Like my cousins that I talk to, the ones that I'm closest with are definitely accountability partners, and not in a like that way, like they will get in your face and be like you. So I think about that group. I think about, the relationship I have with my parents, my brother, my sister, like all of these relationships that are around. And even hence why I even have this business venture with the 5-minute career hack. That's because it's 2 people that I wanted to do that with, right? It wasn't that I needed another thing. it was a space for me to get better. And that's what my kind of side hustle or business is. It's a space where it keeps me sharp, right? I have to study, I have to be a subject matter expert. And I always have something that I'm loving, launching, and learning. Because I expected my job to have that. And now that's what that space gives for me.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, you talked about Gerald. Tell me how you said 18 years you guys
18 years. Yeah, I was like 18 when we got married, just so y'all trying to track with this math. No, I'm just kidding.
Somebody asked me the other day about Maya, like, how do you have a 21-year-old? I was like, because I was an embryo when she was
Yes.
born. So that's
Yes. It was the first time that had happened. They don't tell you that part of the story. I was the first woman that had did that, right?
Don't worry about this black knot cracking, okay?
That's right. Don't worry about it.
So 18 years is a
18 years.
long time. So for
It
those
is.
that are listening, I was married previously. If you don't know anything about me, I was married previously for 20 years, and we had really been together for like 24 years. So
Yes.
man, life just be moving on, don't it?
Yeah, remember we had that conversation. I remember when you told me you was getting married. I was like, really? 19. I'm like, wait, what? Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
But it happened.
I was so proud of my little ring. I was so proud. But he bought it. He saved up, he bought it. So
yes.
Shout out to the ex-mister. We're gonna give a shout out. But 18 years. So I'm saying all that to say marriages go through stages.
Yeah.
So 18 years, do you feel like at 18 years for me, I felt like I'm getting to know my spouse again.
Yeah.
And so is there anything like that? Do you guys feel very grounded, tethered, but then I don't know, maybe you guys are both in a new season of life for yourself, and how much of that shows up for you in your marriage?
Yeah, this because we are, working through relocating and doing these things, right? And what that would look like. So I think that coupled with having a sophomore, right, which means I have always thought about being an empty nester. And I don't say that as in I want my son to be out and I don't love him and all the things, but the thought of being 46 and then being like,
let's go.
When I tell you that is like in my mind, just like,
yeah,
amazing, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, I think we talk a lot about that. So that's really where we are of like who we will be as parents when Jonathan moves to college and what that will look like, because that's what he aspires to do. And so I'm excited about that because I think kind of even the decisions we're making now financially and, like thinking about retirement. I think obviously based on the industry that I'm in, I want that to be sooner than later. He works in education. So I think he sees himself working a lot longer than I do. But all of that impacts your relationship, right? Where you just like, this is what next looks like for me on this day and this time and what we have to do. So I think it's him learning that. I don't think he believes that that's what will happen, but I aspire to be a woman of leisure. I'm trying to tell you, Regina, like,
I had coffee with a friend on yesterday. I think it was. She just retired. I don't
How
know.
old is she?
I don't know, and I'm not.
Okay. I mean, of course, we want to be respectful, but she could be goals.
Older than me, old enough to retire.
Okay.
And she was talking about how her and her husband have always been big travelers, and honey, wherever they were as travelers before her retirement, it is bumping up. Like she was like, we are going on a riverboat cruise. Like they're going on a Mississippi boat cruise.
Oh, wow.
But they like to go all over the world. They are explorers. And just to see her light up as she's talking about this, I was like, oh, that sounds so nice. Like, I can't wait to be there. I'm counting down. I too have a sophomore. It's the last chicken out the coop. And honey,
and what would that look like? What is your relationship now that you've been just balancing parenthood and working and doing the things of like that looks different, right? And then making sure it's aligned because one person may want to be doing this and that. So I think we're at that stage. And I don't know, I always tell people, like, this is probably the best examples, particularly for younger listeners, is when you watch shows, and this may give the example, when you watch shows and they talk about the 10-year class reunion, they're bald, they look, and you think you're so old for your 10-year class reunion, right? Then you realize, man, they were 28.
Yeah.
Like, so when you think about, I'm at that stage now of like, wait, when I can be talking about retire, like I'm talking about this in like 2 years in my life.
My 25th reunion is next month, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when did you graduated a year early?
98.
I did too. That's this? Oh, in 2024. Yeah. Yeah.
23.
No, well, but it'll be May of 24. Right?
Oh, okay. Yes.
Is it?
I'm
or
saying
is it this year?
It's this year. 23. It's 25 years.
Yeah, then it's right. I graduated 98 too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But think about that. Yeah. But that's not as wild to me as in thinking in a couple of years, I'll be in that word empty nester. Like in my mind, that was 60-ish.
Well, and I got friends who are still family planning, like working on getting pregnant or just had babies. And I'm like, oh, bless you.
Yes.
May the peace of the Lord be upon you. Right?
Yes.
Because I'm going to be in a plane.
Yeah.
So that's booked and busy, boarded and busy, something.
Just boarded. It's just going to be wheels up. That's it. So that's what we are. Like, I think it's just really trying to think about what that looks like and really making plans that are like in this next quarter, like we're preparing for Q4 life. You know what I mean? So it's just, and then I think the other part about it, I think just personally, and this, I think at the end of the day, and this is not about a relationship, I think this is just personal mindset for me, because I've lost so many people. And, I lost a close friend that was very young. I think also getting into your relationship with death puts a lot of your relationships in perspective, right? Like none of us are getting out of here any other way, right? So when you get clear about, hey, even just, this week being off, I was talking to my mom earlier of like, she's just like, you're so neat, you're so organized. I'm like, oh, I don't necessarily agree with that, but it's things about now being in perspective of helping a friend's mom clean her house out.
Yeah.
And then thinking about, man, what I want. So when you think about these relationships that's in order, right, at the end of it, because that's what I said, my child in 2 years, or this relationship, have I invested any time in this person that it's just going to be me and you?
Yeah.
So that's what we are, of like, we really need to get sound on the things of, like you said, of like, who are you at this age and what are your goals beyond?
So what do you see for you and Gerald in this next season? Let's fast forward.
So I'll tell you what I want. We're trying to get Mr. Wade encouraged in this way. So I would like to travel. I personally don't want to live in the US permanently. This is breaking news. People finding out, right? It's all of the conversations we're having are just wild to me. Like, people can't learn, they can't read books, they can't. So I think, I don't know how that you know what I mean? Like, we can put a pin there and chat on that. Yeah, that part. So it's wild. So I don't know what that looks like, but that would be what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so how do you all maintain a strong and supportive relationship?
I would say probably giving each other the freedom to be ourselves, and have very different goals, and that being okay, right? So, I think, and I'm thinking through all of like the career, and I wouldn't say it hasn't been changes, but I would say moves in my career and things like that. Gerald's been very supportive. And then even in parenthood, what we want and things that we want to do, I think that has helped as well, because there's just certain things, you have two people coming together and like their experiences, right, and growing up and what they think certain things look like. And I think we have worked through those things and being open to that, right? So that is what I would say has helped, and where we are right now, because what I thought would be, my career is very, very different from Gerald's. And that does impact our life and has you know what I mean? Like I worked retail, so getting home at 1 a.m. and having to get back up and be there at 8, or traveling, it's just very different. And there's been a work to understand that, but I would say that has helped to like learn that this is not necessarily what I thought it would look like or what I think is normal, but let me be open and really understand that for you.
So I would imagine, being in the position that you are at your company, that you earn a really good wage. Um, do those dynamics, and you said Gerald works in higher ed, we ain't got to go into numbers, but I'm curious about some of the psychographics around that.
Yeah.
I don't Do you all earn pretty much at the same pace? Do one of you far out earn the other? Like, how does that affect your marriage and maybe even some of the decisions that you make?
I would say early on, there was definitely, when I think about, and I'm trying to think at what point where we had been married, I would probably definitely, it was like early in the marriage, I would say that was a thing in regards to being in different spaces. I would say now it isn't. And I think probably a pivotal moment was like once we did move and we made some decisions about like, I want to give you this freedom to do this. What do you want to do? But I think that came, to answer your question, with me being clear about like what I was chasing. So I would say that was probably more on me. I think Drew has always been clear that, once he started, I want to be in education. Here's the trajectory. This is what I want to do. And this is the path.
Very specific path in education.
Yeah. Right. For him that he had created. And he was fine with taking that journey of, hey, my boss is going to be here for this amount of time. So I'm going to be in this role, where for me, it was this constant, like, what's next, or a couple of years to do that. And I think once I got clear on those things, what we wanted to do, and financially I was there, that I think it has not been an issue. But I would definitely say early on, because when you get married, you have to talk about savings, like, and what is your affinity or not around that, right? What are your spending habits? So because the more money you make, it's not like those things get easier. But I definitely would say early in our marriage, it was a thing, because it wasn't this abundance. And neither one of us was independently wealthy, where it was just like, whether you worked or not, it was coming in.
Right.
So yeah, but I would say today, no, I would say it's not. I think it's more of, like I said, preparing for retirement and really thinking about this from a what's next. But I would say personally, for me, I wouldn't say that it's a thing. And I think Drew has been very open around that. And I don't think it's kind of like, I think about and that's why I think I'm thinking about other people. And for us, I don't think that we compare that in that way. But I definitely would say early, that was something that, you look sideways, and then you gotta get back on your situation and stay focused with you.
Do you feel like you've had to advocate for yourself in your career with regard to earning wages? I mean, talk to me about that, especially as a woman of color, and let's just be even more specific, a Black woman in America, working in leadership. How have you navigated those waters? Like, what has been some of the most successful strategies you've used?
Yeah, I would say in the beginning, like, I was taught, and I say this because I think our rearing definitely shapes our mindset in a lot of ways. And I think for me, I was always taught, you should just, kind of keep your head down and work hard, and then people would know. And that didn't always serve me well.
And leaning in don't always work.
Ma'am, I mean, it's just
so.
right. So I would say, especially like we actually did something. When I say 5-minute career hack, we have one of our clients is pay scale. So you have the gender. So I feel like I have a lot of knowledge around the gender pay gap because we just kind of did like a live reaction to 2023's numbers. And it was something that was in there that spoke to me, that, to your point with this, is it was obviously it has it by age, by location, by education. And one of the things to your point around race, it specifically talks about Asian women who actually out earn white men, right? And the reason why them being the model minority, right? Which we can put a pin and come back to that. But when we thinking about being on the flip side of those biases as a Black person, right, that you have to work past, but then also from a pay MBA, it was the biggest disparity. And I had been told different, right? So I went straight through, did my undergrad, did grad school, and it was like a 70, because like right now the wage gap is like 83 cents when you look at uncontrolled to every dollar the white man makes. But for an MBA is 77, right? So the largest disparity for women, and this is with it. And that was just so wild to me. But that's been my experience to answer. So I would say, I had supervisors for a long time that didn't value my education, and it was more of these other things that I wasn't aware of. So to answer your question of like how to navigate and I guess advocate for myself is you got to be clear of what's important to the decision makers. And you can argue all day what should or shouldn't be, but to your point of like knowing and doing those things, you can go and do that or not, right? Yeah. So I would say that would be the biggest strategy that I would say, just keep it that simple. You can keep trying to make people, and I talk to people all the time where they're like, oh, I'm going to go to my boss, or we were having a conversation, right? About the person that was really upset at her annual review and all these things. Ma'am, you can make all the list and you can say you did all the things, but if they do not agree, it doesn't matter. So I always tell people, no one's saying that you are wrong. Both can be true. What you said, and you're not getting any more money.
Yeah.
So I think you just got to be clear of what's most important to the decision maker, whomever that is, and get aligned with that would be my advice for anybody. And it's not that it's that simple, but it goes back for me, like in all you're getting, get an understanding.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. I want you to talk to our listeners about maybe some ways society can better support or empower women who are juggling these roles of motherhood and career. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So, I would say the role that motherhood, I'll start with what it's helped me with. And I think it has helped me be more empathetic. I think before of like understanding someone being late, being disheveled, having a mom brain, whatever that is, or just that one moment where you tried to squeeze past something and your stomach didn't suck in, like all that physical space, but you probably have been there in other places too. You tried to do something and it was that way and it was no way. It wasn't that way anymore. Right. So are you feeling me?
I'm feeling you.
So I share that to say, I think we have to have some mindset. So I think for me, that's always where you start, because you can educate people on things, but if they don't change their mind about it or their, perspective, it doesn't matter. So I would say that ways that people can support moms, whatever their choice is, if that's staying at home, if that's choosing to homeschool, have their kids in public or private, continue to move forward in their career. I would say one, value the value that mothers bring. And I think that's the core of, even as we talk about these pay, right? Is there's a perception that women's work and the skills that women bring are less valuable. So I think we have to, the way you can support that is check in with yourself today to think about things that your mom or a mom that's in your life, a mom that is doing some things, are there things that she's doing that you're undervaluing, right? So if that's just, you can text her or call her. She takes pride in her kids looking a certain way. She's the mom that peels the oranges, whatever that is, check in. And I guess that's what my advice would be, is like, how can you just value it a bit more and celebrate that? And celebrate doesn't mean something elaborate, but just saying a kind word and letting her know that you see her. And you never know where that can go, as that someone feeling appreciated, how that continues, that love can move forward to the next person.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Always so good to hang out with you and talk. such a wealth of knowledge. And thank you so much for sharing really about your career, about and poor Jonathan. Sorry, we stayed on you a little bit longer.
But we didn't really go in. So it was no like
Okay.
secrets. I didn't share any game.
Okay.
So he could still have all the game and what he's gonna do next. So he's
Fair
good.
enough. Fair enough. But Jonathan and Gerald, thank you for sharing with Alicia with the world. You are awesome. So glad we could have you on today. If you are listening, if perhaps this is your first time, we have what I like to call Woman Unplugged. It is a discussion on the previous episode with another guest that could be male or female, but I really like this space being strictly feminine, if you will.
Yes.
So join us on Woman Unplugged as we unpack Alicia's episode and talk about some of the themes that she talked about. With that being said, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you do all the things, like, subscribe, share. We love you guys. Take care. Bye. And that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the Woman Everyday podcast. I hope you found today's conversation inspiring and empowering. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Together, we can embrace the joys, overcome the challenges, and create a life that embraces both our aspirations and our roles as mothers and partners. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends, family, and anyone you believe would benefit from these stories. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Ever forward, Regina Joy.